Welcome to this video. Today, I have something very special for you. The question that often comes up is, Sebastian, how many polishing pads do I need and which polishing machine should I consider buying? And today I want to illustrate this properly so that you can fully understand why it might be important not to focus solely on 125 mm, let alone 150 mm, but rather to place the emphasis on 75 mm and smaller. I have prepared something for you here. Let's take a look. I have divided the vehicle into areas to illustrate it properly for you. Here. It's simply about showing on the object which polishing machine is needed where on the vehicle. Of course, you don't all have the 1996 or the E. One person might also have a VW Touran and a larger van where the surfaces are different. But I just want to show you in this vehicle how much you really need to pay attention or how easily you can misjudge when it comes to which polishing pads or how many you should perhaps get. You can see here, I have partially wrapped this vehicle with tape. I have masked off half of the vehicle as I would when polishing it. I haven't masked any edges here to protect anything. Rather, I want to show you what I am working on with the pad. I have circled this in orange or framed it in a square here, and we will also take a closer look at everything that is 75 mm and smaller. I have marked it here for you with blue tape. We will first walk around the vehicle a bit, and I think you can already see that even if we go a little higher, there isn't much orange to be found on the car. And where do we find orange? Of course, where we have nice flat surfaces, where there are no edges, no bends, and so on. And here we start on the hood. The first area I would polish with 125 would be everything you see in this orange window. And this goes up to half of the hood, but keep in mind I have only applied it in a 1/2,000 area so far. This means you need to calculate it as double. So it continues the same way over here. But I didn't want to sacrifice roll after roll of tape here. I only took care of half the car, just using 2 of these 125 pads for this area. This area of 125 naturally counts as part of the rest over here as well. But now we come to the first point, and it starts here. In between, you can see this blue line. Here is a small bent edge. I wouldn't use an ER pad on this, because the elevation is so strong that you would end up polishing along the edge up here and working the paint down here into the 1000. It's also not very clearly visible from above. But you can really visualize this nicely with the tape here, showing that there are indeed real differences in which backing plate or polishing machine is used here. Everyone will have a different tactic. There are certainly enough people who go over the edge with 125 or 150. Anyway, I will show you my technique because I take absolutely no risks, whether it's on my own vehicles or on vehicles of friends or customers or whatever. And that's why I will show you my tactic. So here, 125, 125, 125, 125, and here you have this edge. I don't go with cut and apply pressure with the pad there because I would sand down the edge up here. I don't want that. That's why I'm working on this narrow area here with the E-pad of the Evo Mini. I will grab a few polishing pads here so we can see this much better. And you already know the machine here with the ER plate. We'll set that aside for now because we don't need it in this case. We're focusing more on the pad size. And here you can see the pad quite well. And you can also see that the small 35 or 30 fits ideally on this edge here, and you can wonderfully refine this edge. And now many points come together here. The next person will say, oh Sebastian, this is extremely time consuming to go over it again with the small pad. I have to say, not at all for me. Why? This area here is long, but so narrow. That means you go up and down about 5 lanes here, or you divide it up, do the stretch first, and then do the stretch. We are now always talking about wanting to polish the vehicle as perfectly as possible. It's not about quickly polishing something here. In that case, you don't need to make this distinction. But I really want to get the scratches out at every corner and restore a nice shine. This means I will polish this small area, this tip, with a different backing plate. Now comes the next point. We are still on the hood, and you can see what kind of division a hood requires. Because a hood is not just, oh, hood 125, let's go. Look here where my tape is. The tape doesn't even go all the way down. Why? Because here, the hood drops down extremely. This means that here too, we are working up here with the ER pad. We could just say, oh, come on, it's just a surface. I'll just go down to here. But look at what happens here. To properly reach the surface, I have to tilt the pad significantly. Do you see what happens? You want to polish this line here nicely. You press exactly where my fingers are pointing. And now you polish along this edge while the rest of the pad is completely in the air. Then also down here. Now you want to go even further down. This means that up here, the pad is completely in the air. It is neither good for the pad, nor for the drive or the machine, and also not for the polishing result. That's why we don't use the pad in that area, but rather the ER down here to make the edge really nice. What you can also take at this point is the pad that I have lying here on top. You can also use this down here. You can see that it lies almost flat, so it can still be done very, very well. You just have to try it out, but you will figure it out over time. You develop a sense of what works and what doesn't. So here would be, for example, the area with 550mm pads or with the smaller pad. This might be a job that takes about 3 to 5 minutes at most. Just like here, we have this narrow area that we are working on. And now we can decide, for example, to continue with the small pad on the nose here at the front, because we also need to get in between the BMW logo. Do you see it here? Or we take the pad and work along here again. It gets a bit tighter under the logo. You could still do it if necessary, but I would just sit comfortably with the stool in front and work on the entire front end with the small pad. Now let's take a look further at the car. Look here. I don't need to use any tape here. It should be obvious that we have to work with an ER pad. A 50 won't fit here either. This means we can save the blue tape. You know the drill. Up front here, everything is done with a small pad again. You see, it was already down there. So the hood has very, very different surface sizes, even though it is actually a smooth surface and quite large. But that's not the case. Look up here. Next point. These nozzles are not present on all vehicles. If this nozzle weren't here, I would work on the entire area with 125. But you also notice something here. The tape doesn't stick all the way to the edge. Because I have continuously adapted my tactics over the last few years. In the past, I always polished right up to the edge with the ER pad through painstaking, cramping, time-consuming work, down to the last detail. Try to work on these small edges here with the ER pad. But it has happened time and again that you simply overlook scratches here, or that the pad has slipped a bit and then you missed the scratches so they weren't removed. That's why I changed my tactic, and I already made a video about it for you. I do it this way. I polish about 2 cm close to the edges. So I don't need to focus at all on whether I'm hitting these edges exactly with the pad. It's all completely irrelevant to me. I simply take an ER pad afterwards, or have, for example, my Evo Mini or Peak Z ready, and now I can go back and work on these edges, these narrow areas, very, very cleanly. As I said, it's really about achieving maximum defect correction now. It's not about saying, oh, it doesn't matter if there's something on the edge. No, now it's about making everything perfect. So, no longer struggling here with an ER pad like before, hoping to hit the right spot and that everything works out, but simply stepping away a bit and leaving a gap here. That's why I left a gap. I work best with an ER pad, and it works wonderfully, allowing for very nice control. But also with the small one, because now comes the next point, this corner here. With many vehicles, how are you supposed to get into this corner with an ER pad? It's impossible. Are you starting to grind on the fender here? Or because the hood rises a bit here, are you going to go along the edge massively at the top? I'll try to film it for you. Look at how much of a mountain this paint surface creates. If I go up here with the pad starts to tip massively. That means I would be working really hard on this edge up here on the surface, and that is neither healthy for the pad nor for this edge, especially when you are working in the cut area. The pad thickness is currently irrelevant. It's about the size here. That's quite unfortunate. That's why you see here how I have categorized it. And everything here is 125. At the edge, you can also consider whether to go along with the pad or to go over the edge nicely again with the small pad. In 2001, you can decide everything for yourself then. But up here, I simply take the small pad for this little triangle and can reach into these small corners. You see, it is so pointed up here. You just have to go over it, but not with the larger one, rather with the small pad. Then I can work on this entire edge from top to bottom really nicely, and for the absolute details and fine points. That's it for the hood. If you have any questions about it, feel free to write them in the comments below. I can also gladly make a part 2. I just wanted to clarify this for you. Let's move on to the next component, which is up here. And up here, it's exactly the same situation. No panoramic roof, no sunroof, everything is relaxed. For polishing, you have a nice flat surface. This means that everything on top of the roof is a 125mm pad. But even here you can see, I don't go all the way to the edge. First of all, here is a rubber trim. And also here, there is a corner where you can't get in with an ER pad at all. How do you want to do that? Completely illogical. Would you polish here on the rubber, or here on the door frame, or really go after the rubber at the front? That means masking off and then getting as close as possible. And for the details, this is how I do it. We handle the details with the small pad, which can really get nicely into these corners. This is my tactic. There are no fixed rules for it. You will now meet someone else who will say, oh, I do everything like this. I do it this way. Everyone has their own tactic. This is my tactic, and I am super successful with it and can really achieve the maximum results without having to focus heavily on these edges. I simply leave them out from the start as much as possible. And then I simply go over it again with the pad, and I have a wonderful even result even at the edge, because that makes the difference. Yes, you can see here that I have marked half of the roof. You would essentially mark the entire roof now, but I am leaving a little bit out all around the edge just to show you. Here I applied a bit too much adhesive. I would only go up to here. I hope you understand it, but the roof is quite easy. If you have a panoramic roof in here, then you always have these narrow edges. Or would you, for example? Work with an ER or an ER machine or an ER backing plate. It always varies from vehicle to vehicle. Here we are at the fender, and you can see very clearly that I didn't use any tape here because I can save the blue here. It would all end in a blue tape frame. These edges are so slightly curved. Do you also see how the light bars are always bending? Here, you can't do anything with 125 at all. This area of the vehicle is so narrow and so concave. Here you can work with an ER pad. 2001, that is actually the perfect size. 75 is almost too big, so you can see how often we need the small pads here. Also here at the front, these small edges, that is all done with the pad or it. Here is another small spot that we might have marked in orange. But for the small area, folks, I will use an ER or work here with my long ER. So this is all in the range of 50, 75 and a bit smaller. Same on the other side with the fender. Makes sense. Let's go to the door. Here too, look. The only strip that I can polish well with 125 on this car is the one over this rubber trim down here. It tends to get narrower underneath. You keep hitting the bottom against the sill and the top against this trim. So it's all 75. Here, down here is 125. And up here again is 75. And for the small things up here, we are back to the ER backing plate. Everything you can polish with 75 meters, you can also alternatively do with 50 meters. So just imagine a lot of blue tape all around here. I left that out because basically everything else on the car is now blue. Then up here, the A-pillar, the mirror, everything. In that case, I would take an E-pad because it is very curved. If it is a bit smoother for you, you can also use an ER pad for 75, but you can already see here that the pad is sticking out on the left and right and is massively tilting. This means that if you were to press here to polish the entire area, you would be pressing heavily on the center. And here you would be polishing the middle strip, which is about 1 to 2 centimeters wide, the strip that I am drawing with my finger, you would be polishing heavily. This means applying much more pressure here than on the edges. This means you would remove a lot of paint in the cut area, and therefore the pad is not suitable here. I would either take the E-pad here as it sits really nicely and only wobbles just a tiny bit. That would actually be perfect. Or who says I have the time, I can take care of the details. Here a path down for a while, a path up back, 1,000. That's actually the perfect measure. This continues up here. It should be clear that we are still working with the small pad here. Here it continues. You might think back here, everything is huge areas. Take a look at this. I'm going to take this pad here and tilt it completely. We would polish again with significant pressure in the middle because we apply the most pressure there. And here might be the only area where the pad is properly seated. Because if we go further down, look here, it starts to lift up. And underneath it, a vacuum space is already forming, causing the pad to bend again. That means you would polish heavily down here again, hardly at all in the middle, and work back into the paint up here again. So also the pad here at the back on the rear. Here is perhaps the only spot, so the area, but it doesn't make sense, these 20x20 centimeters. Then I will definitely take a smaller pad. That means here at the fender, there is also no space at all. Here, it hits again. There is absolutely no space. I would do all of this with either him, because you can move nicely over here. Also here, it gets almost a bit too tight for him, as the pad is sticking out again. Here you can nicely work with 75. Down here, everything would be in the range of 75 millimeters, so you can also see here that the pad has been on pause the whole time. Let's take another look at the lower area. So here at the fender, everything is also 5 and 30, a maximum of 50 millimeter down here. The pad here at the sill looks wide, but it is completely concave. So here too, the pad goes all the way back to the rear. Up here you can still use 75 millimeters, but we have very pointed corners here. Here it gets a bit narrower again, and overall it would be manageable with 75 here. But I would do the small corners, the details again with the smaller one. Again, here at the back, the 75 at the rear. Here the stripe, 75. The bend that is underneath, 1996. I always mark it a bit with my fingers. 30 mm, this piece here, is actually 50 millimeters and smaller. Here at the bottom, The edge is 30 mm, the edge here is 50 mm, and down here it is long and totally concave, right? Correctly curved. Everything 50 millimeters and smaller. So very little at the tailgate can be done with 75 millimeters to get it really clean. And with that, we have actually completed the vehicle, because you need to think about the same thing again here. So with that, we have now divided the vehicle into different areas. This is how I would do it. Everyone does it differently, but this is my safe tactic, and this is how I can polish best. For the vehicle, I feel like there's a bit of a balance between 75 mm and most smaller. Here, I would really focus on 75 mm, 50 mm, and 30 mm for the vehicle. With a vehicle in the VW Touran style, because I had two here over the last few weeks, you can really focus more on 75 and also on 125, but you still need a few small pads. Here with these, I would call them normal vehicles. You are usually done with an ER pad after the roof and hood, because the doors on these vehicles nowadays are so curved with so many edges and design peaks that you can't really lay the pad flat at all. Instead, the pad either sticks out or is totally concave or convex. And that's why I absolutely recommend it for 2001. If you're getting a polishing machine, make sure you have at least 75 mm to start with. And in my opinion, anyone who wants to polish the entire vehicle properly cannot do without a small backing pad equipment. How many pads do I need for such a car? I would calculate here. Let's assume that we are polishing in 2 stages. I do this in 99% of the cases to remove scratches and create shine. That means I would get 4 cut pads for the car in the 125 range. I would also get 4 finishing pads in 125 because you will need these pads later on as the vehicle will look nice and you won't have to do cutting as often. That means I would just get 4 finishing pads, so 4. For the 75 mm pads, I would also get at least 4 in the cut area and at least 4 in the finish area. I will also display this on the side again. With this, you should be able to get around the vehicle very, very well. I always assume that you give the pads a little break and switch them out from time to time. Then it should work well. This is now the absolute minimum. In fact, 6 pads and 75 mm is even safer. Now we come to the pads. For the car, I would also get 4 pads in the cut area of 50 mm and also 4 finish pads in 50 mm and 4 in the 30 mm range. 4 cut, 4 finish. This gives you a really nice, even gradation. You are covered with everything. If you have a vehicle that has very large, wide areas and very few narrow ones, you can minimize the small pads a bit. Maybe 2000 is enough for thickness, and adjust a bit for 75 and 125, perhaps a little higher, maybe 6 pads. I hope I was able to help you well with this video and give you a little insight as well as nicely show how detailed a vehicle can actually be designed from the way you polish. So, for those still watching, they definitely love my voice. I have talked a lot. There was a lot of theory. The practical part is actually the polishing on the vehicle, which I have already shown you in many videos. I will also link you a few suitable machines, as well as the appropriate pads for them. Think about the topic of 30 to 50 millimeters. This is incredibly important to truly polish a vehicle completely. Mirror caps, a pillar, B-pillar, C-pillar. Without these machines, you simply cannot work around the vehicle. Thank you very much for watching. Your Sebastian is always available for questions. And if you didn't manage to get through the video, you can also fly around here.